The Kennedy Center presents Up Close and Personal with Jerry Herman.
Well, tonight we're going to give you a very abridged version of Jerry's life. And of course, it's always best to start at the beginning. And the great thing I think about Jerry, one of the things that really helped him focus his career were his parents, who clearly were very helpful. Talk a little bit about your mother, your father, and how they helped you get inspired into theater.
I was so fortunate to have parents that loved the Broadway musical. So when I was big enough to fill a third seat, they would take me with them on a regular basis. And one night I saw Annie Get Your Gun with the great Ethel Merman belting out those Irving Berlin songs. And I was able to come home and play 3 or 4 songs on my mother's piano that I had never heard before. And it really changed my life, because I thought, what a gift to be able to give someone the gift of music. And I wanted to do that, even at that tender age.
And I know that your mother, I think she had a radio program.
My mother was a singer and had her own radio show called Ruth Sachs Sings. It was a 15-minute a show on WEVD. I don't even know if it's there anymore.
It sure is. It's still there.
And she was very proud of that. And I had a wonderfully happy home life.
And because she was in the business, she knew a lot of people. And apparently she was instrumental in getting somebody very important to listen to your work.
She announced one day that she had made an appointment for me with Frank Lesser, the great Frank Lesser, the Guys and Dolls, Where's Charlie, Frank Lesser. And I said, I'm not going. I said, I'm a kid. I was writing these songs purely as a hobby. And they were not great songs, I have to tell you the truth. And I knew that my mother wanted someone of note to hear them. So she said a line that has stayed with me all these years. She said, would you please waste a half hour of your life? You can't say no to that. So I took my little briefcase and I got on the bus. We lived in Jersey City, New Jersey, and it was a half-hour bus ride to Manhattan. And a very scared little me went up to Mr. Lesser's office, and he made me stay there all afternoon and play everything I had written. And I guess he saw something in me that made him ask if he could call my parents. He did, and he told them that he thought they should let me try it. That it was a tough business, but that he thought that I might be able to make it work for me. So I owe a lot to my mother, Mafia, and to Frank. He was wonderful to me.
Well, so how does one go from, so you're a young kid and Frank Lesser gives you great advice and you're writing songs, and then you go to college, and college was very important in terms of your career development.
I went to a university, the University of Miami, where the drama department was experimental. And they made me light somebody's show and appear as an actor in somebody's show and learn all the crafts, work with a costume designer. And at that time, I didn't know why I needed to know all those things. I kept on saying, I want to be a composer lyricist. I don't need to know all that. Well, I want to tell you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because being in other people's shoes, the people who come together to create a Broadway show, is an undefinable treasure to know what it takes to create the mood for a song. I was sitting next to the great Theron Musser, who was the lighting lady for Mame, and we were all very friendly, and she let me sit next to her, and she was lighting Angela's "If He Walked Into My Life," and she just wasn't happy with it. It was in Connecticut, and she kept on saying, try a little this, try a little that. She had a microphone and was talking to the person in the light booth. And very quietly I said, try an amber gel. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure at that moment she must have thought, the songwriter. But she stopped for a moment and she talked into a microphone and she said, try an amber gel. And the whole scene turned into fall in Connecticut. And it was beautiful, and she kept it. And that little tiny bit of knowledge made me feel like I was part of the putting together of a show rather than just a cog in the wheel.
And I would bet, since you performed in some of these musicals in college, that also helped you be more sensitive to the actors' needs. Clearly.
Absolutely. And to know what range to write songs in, and not to make songs so rangy as some wonderful composers do, that the average person can't sing an entire song in their normal voice.
So you graduate college and you come to New York. You obviously don't start writing for the theater, so what do you do to get your name known?
I did off-Broadway reviews. They were very, very popular in the years that I first had an apartment in New York. And one was called Upstairs at the Downstairs, and it ran for years. And mine was called Nightcap. And I got 4 talented people together, one of whom was Charles Nelson Riley, the delightful Charles, who is no longer with us. And I did this little review with me at the piano, because we couldn't afford to pay anybody, so I was at the piano. And the next day after we opened, there was a little review by Richard Watts in the New York Post. And it said, get down to West 4th Street in the Village, because a new Rodgers and Hart has arrived. Well, the next day, I walked from my little apartment to my job at the piano, and there was a madhouse in front of the little theater, and I was very upset. I said, they're in the way of the posters. I had no idea what it felt like to see a crowd come to a show.
And because of this hit review, this the Evening of Cabaret, and interestingly enough, when young writers come to me about how to get their careers going now, I tell them cabaret is a very important art form.
Oh, it is singularly important. I owe a great deal to the world of cabaret.
And one day, a producer comes.
One day, a charming white-haired gentleman came over to me at the piano and said, I'm going to be doing a musical on Broadway next year, and I'd like to know if you would be interested in having lunch with me. And I thought, this is not for real. And I said, well, I don't know, I was skeptical. And he gave me his card and kept on insisting that I meet with him, which I did eventually. And he said, I'm doing a musical set in Israel. Do you know anything about the sound of Israeli music? And I said, of course I do. I knew absolutely nothing. And he ended up sending me to Israel with a book writer who I had never met. And the two of us were on a quest to find an idea for a musical. And on the plane, there were a group of widows American widows who were going to Israel, and they were all looking for men. And I nudged John and I said, that's kind of wonderful. And we put together the idea for Milk and Honey.
And of course, that show was a success, his first Broadway musical. Clearly that show brought a young, new, richly talented composer lyricist to Broadway. That show gave Jerry his first hit record. I think it was Eddie Fisher who made it successful. And we wanted you to hear it. And to sing it tonight, we have one of Broadway's most talented leading men, and he's also one of daytime television's biggest star. Those of you who watch The Guiding Light, please welcome Ron Rain.
Shalom, shalom, you'll find shalom, the nicest greeting you know. It means bonjour, salut, and skol, and twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things, like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye, you say goodbye with shalom. It's a very useful word. It can get you through the day. All you really need to know, you can hardly go wrong. You're bilingual as long as you say shalom. The nicest greeting I know. Twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things, like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye, if your voice has I don't want to go in it, say goodbye with a little hello in it, and say goodbye with shalom.
Well, your next musical is a smashing success. It runs for nearly 8 years, and of course the show is Hello, Dolly. But that didn't come easy. That wasn't just handed to you.
No, Mr. David Merrick.
The notorious producer.
Notorious, but great producer, who did one hit musical after another, summoned me to his office. And he said he had just seen Milk and Honey, and he was very impressed, but that he didn't know whether I was American enough for this show. Now, you can't say that to me without a fight. So I knew I had to go home and write a couple of things. Even though I had a show running on Broadway, I wanted that job. And I knew I had to audition for it. So I asked if he had any material, and he gave me a script that said Matchmaker Draft Number 1 on the cover, because the show was based on Thornton Wilder's The Matchmaker, a great play by a great American playwright. And I went home, and over the course of a weekend, I wrote 4 songs that fit very neatly into places in the script. And I called a girl who did all my singing with me in all the little shows that I had done, and asked if she would learn some of the songs and sing them with me. And Monday morning, we went to Mr. Merrick's office and put on a little show. And I think he was more amazed at the fact that I did this in a weekend than even with the material that came out. But
Are any of those songs still in the show?
3 of them.
Isn't that amazing? Many people may not know that the show was originally intended for Ethel Merman, I think.
Right.
What happened, and how did Carol Channing come about?
When I was finished with the score, I was in his office, and he said, I'm going to call Ethel because I think it's all ready to be heard. And he called, and he was on the phone, and he said, Ethel, I've got this wonderful new show for you. And then he suddenly, his face dropped. And he said, are you sure, Ethel? Are you sure? And he said, well, I'm awfully sorry because it would have been good for you. And he hung the phone up and announced that she didn't want to live any more of her life in a dressing room. And that she didn't want to come hear it because she didn't want to be,
Tempted, yes.
Tempted. And there was my leading lady.
How was Carol Channing found?
Gower Champion, who was the director and who was already signed, said, well, I have a very offbeat idea. And we went to see Carol Channing in Shores of the Millionaires, a wonderful play in New Jersey. And we fell in love with her. And I had to rewrite half the score to fit in Carol's range and to make her comfortable and feel good.
And of course, that role gave her the definitive role of her career.
Yes.
Clearly.
Oh, okay. She never stopped doing it.
And my understanding is I think she only missed one performance in 35 years.
We don't even talk about the one performance.
The one performance is great.
Because it's nice to say she never missed
Exactly.
a
Well, Hello, Dolly, of course, is filled with one great showstopper after another. And one of the loveliest songs, though, is the one we wanted you to hear tonight. To sing it, please welcome one of Jerry's favorite performers. He has starred in countless musicals on Broadway and on tour. Jerry personally selected him to star in a recent revival of the Grand Tour, where he received glowing reviews. Please welcome Jason Graae.
It only takes a moment for your eyes to meet, and then your heart knows in a moment you will never be alone again. I held her for an instant, but my arms felt sure and strong. It only takes a moment to be loved, a whole life long. I've heard it said that love must grow, that to be sure you must be slow. I saw you smile, and now I know. I listened to just my heart. Your smile made me trust my heart, for I held her for an instant, but my arms felt sure and strong. It only takes a moment and that is all that love's about, and will recall when time runs out, that it only took a moment to be loved, a whole life long.
During the long run of Hello, Dolly, Jerry wrote another musical, the hugely successful and the award-winning Mame. But we'll talk about that show a little later. I want to talk about a show that starred Robert Preston and Bernadette Peters. Yes. And despite those two, the show didn't run that long, or I certainly didn't run long enough. And of course, the show is Mack and Mabel. I think it's your finest work. I know it's a special musical.
You're not supposed to say that you like your daughter better than your son.
Yes.
But I do love Mack and Mabel. Very, very.
What was the story? Tell the audience who are not familiar with the show what it's about.
It's about the stormy love affair between Mack Sennett and Mabel Normand. Mack Sennett was the father of silent screen comedy, the Keystone Cops and the Bathing Beauties and all those car chases, and Mabel Normand became his most famous and his great love, leading lady. And it's a love story, but it's set against all of that turbulent period in the beginning of Hollywood, actually.
We have two songs from you tonight from Mack and Mabel. The first song is a song that Mabel gets to sing. At one point in the story, Mabel's anger with Mack is so intense that she can only let out that emotion in song. And to sing that song, we have the Tony Award-winning star of Jerome Robbins' Broadway, who continues to dazzle audiences around the country and around the world with her symphony orchestra engagements. Please welcome Debbie Gravitte.
This ninny of a puppet was available the second that he called. And all he had to do was yell, "Hey, Mabel!" and this dumb hash slinger crawled. For 7 lousy years, I've heard him swear and shove and shout, "With you or without you!" Well, it's gonna be without. I gotta give my life some sparkle and fizz, and think a thought that isn't wrapped up in his. The place that I consider paradise is wherever he ain't, wherever he ain't. No more to wither when he's grouchy and gruff. No more to listen to him bellow and bluff. Tomorrow morning I'll be strutting my stuff wherever he ain't, wherever he ain't. Enough of being bullied and bossed. Ta-ta, auf Wiedersehen and get lost. I walked behind him like a meek little lamb and had my fill of his not giving a damn. I'll go to Sydney or Ceylon or Siam, wherever he ain't, wherever he ain't. be behaving like a simpering sap. And so I'm looking for a spot on the map. If he's going south, I'm going north. If he's going back, I'm going forth. Wherever he
Now that's telling.
Yes. There's a song from Mack and Mabel that has become a true standard in the Great American Songbook. It has a stunningly beautiful melody wrapped around a heartbreaking lyric, and yet it was the most difficult song that you had to ever write. Talk a little bit about it.
I knew that when I was writing Mack and Mabel that I had to somewhere find a way to write a romantic song for Mack Sennett, who was a very rough and gruff man and really didn't have a romantic side. But I knew that he loved this girl. And I could not figure out how to say that. And when I got the idea of warning her that he could never give her all the things that she actually deserved, I got all excited and I said, I know how to do this song. And it came out of me in about 20 minutes, and it's become one of my favorite songs that I've ever written.
So the idea of the song took you months, I think, but
The idea took about 8 months, and the writing of it took a half hour.
Absolutely amazing. And to sing it, please welcome back Ron Raines.
I won't send roses or hold the door. I won't remember which dress you wore. My heart is too much in control. The lack of romance in my soul will turn you gray, kid. So stay away, kid. Forget my shoulder when you're in need. Forgetting birthdays is guaranteed. And should I love you, you will be the last to know. I won't send roses, and roses suit you so. My pace is frantic, my temper's cross, with words romantic, I'm at a loss. I'd be the first one to agree that I'm preoccupied with me, and it's inbred, kid. So keep your head, kid. In me you'll find things like guts and nerve, but not the kind of things that you deserve. And so while there's a fighting chance, just turn and go. I won't send roses, and roses suit you so.
The next musical after the Grand Tour was a bona fide smash. It ran and it ran and it ran. Audiences loved every minute of it, every sparkle of it, every shine. And it was really a groundbreaking achievement in many, many ways. And of course, it has a great score. It won Jerry his second Tony Award, and the show itself won a Tony Award as Best Musical. And of course, I'm talking about Cage Aux Folles. Jerry, talk a little bit about how that came about. How did you first come to this project?
I went to see the French film, Cage Aux Folles, with a friend of mine and in Manhattan. And we walked out of the theater, and I remember so vividly my turning to my friend Chuck and saying, that's going to be my next musical. I know how to do that material. And I called my agent immediately and said, you've got to get me the rights to this French film. And he called me back a few hours later to tell me that it was already being worked on by a very good group of people, and I was heartbroken. Because finding material is probably more difficult for me than writing material. Finding a story and characters that you want to spend your life with. And I turned everything else down that came along, and about 5 or 6 months later, I got a call from the producers of La Cage, and they said, how would you like to do a musical version of La Cage Aux Folles? And I said, you can't be serious. I've been pining away because I knew it was, they had wanted to begin all over again, and I've always felt it was a show that was fated for me. Yeah.
And because of the subject matter, I'm sure everyone here knows the show, but obviously it was about two men in love, a family, and the show tried out in Boston.
Yes.
What was that like?
I said to Harvey Fierstein, the book writer, and to Arthur Lawrence, the director, wonderful, wonderful talents, both of them. I said, what are we doing in Boston with a drag show? But Boston fell in love with us. And the reaction was so extraordinary and so moving that it remains one of the ultimate experiences I've ever had in the theater. Sitting in the back of the Colonial Theater on the night of the first preview and knowing in your heart that you had an enormous hit on your hands, and that's what happened there.
Were you at all worried about, frankly, the blue-haired crowd in Boston?
Were we? In fact, Harvey and Arthur and I were sitting in the back row of the Colonial at that performance. You learn a lot from your first preview performance. And there was a typical Back Bay couple sitting in front of us. Charming, charming people. He had a rep tie on, and she had kind of blue, gray hair. They were just perfect. And I thought, oh my God, these people are going to throw stones at us. I don't know what's going to happen. And the show opened with a dazzling opening number where the girls ripped their wigs off at the end of the number and displayed the fact that they were men. And they were very stiff, this couple. We were watching them very closely. And they didn't react. And I don't know if they were enjoying that or not, but they didn't react. And about 10 or 15 minutes later, there's a scene where Georges sings a love song to Alban, recalling their 20 or 25 years together and the day that they met. And in the middle of the song, I saw the couple put their heads together, and they held hands, and the three of us were awash in tears because we knew at that crucial moment that they had accepted this as a universal love story. It was one of the great moments of my life.
Well, feel free to hold hands or knock heads when we hear the great Ron Raines sing that song. Please welcome back Ron Raines.
Do you recall that windy little beach we walked along? That afternoon in fall, that afternoon we met. A fellow with a concertina sang, what was the song? It's strange what we recall, and odd what we forget. I heard la da 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 as we walked on the sand. I heard la da da da. I believe it was early September. Through the crash of the waves, I could hear them tell the words were romantic. Something about sharing, something about always. Though the years race along, I still think of our song on the sand. And I still try and search for the words I can barely remember. Though the time tumbles by, there is one thing that I am forever certain of. I hear la da 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 da. And I'm young and in love. I believe it was early September. Through the crash of the waves, I could tell that the words were romantic. Something about sharing, something about always. Though the years race along, I still think of our song on the sand. And I still try and search for the words I can barely remember. Though the time tumbles by, there is one thing that I am forever certain of. I hear la da 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 da. And I'm young and in love.
Clearly, a major name in American musical theater history was born because between having 3 huge hits in a row, Milk and Honey, Dolly, and Mame, Jerry Herman was here to stay. And it was also a personal triumph for Angela Lansbury. It not only won her first of 4 Tony Awards, but it really launched her career as a Broadway musical comedy, musical theater icon. But truth be told, she had to fight to get that part. Talk a little bit about that.
When we were auditioning ladies for Mame, every female who was breathing in New York City came and sang for us and read for us, and nobody hit us in the heart. They were wonderfully talented ladies, but they just didn't have that something special that we were looking for. And I went home one night and I went through all my playbills. I collect playbills from the year one. And I came across a playbill that was from Anyone Can Whistle, a Stephen Sondheim musical in which I saw Angela Lansbury belt out two great songs. And I thought, this is a great actress. Nobody knows she can sing like that. And I told my producers to send for Angela Lansbury, and one of them turned to me and said, that's the woman who plays everybody's mother in Hollywood. And I said, would you do this just for me as a favor? Of course, they couldn't say no to that. And they sent for Miss Lansbury, who came to my little apartment door. And when I opened the door, I knew that I had found my Mame. She was tall and stunning in a mink coat, and I just knew. So we became fast friends, and I made a pact with her. I said, I'll teach you 2 songs from the score that nobody has ever heard anybody but me sing. And that they would be absolutely astonished if you came in tomorrow and sang those 2 songs. And she said, it's a deal. I'll stay up all night and I'll learn them. And we went to dinner together. I taught her the songs. She went home with a little tape recorder. And the next day, in an empty Winter Garden Theater, I was seated with Lawrence and Lee, the writers, and Gene Sachs, the director. And when it came time for the audition to begin, I excused myself as if I were going to the little boys' room, and I made my way down into the orchestra pit. And I went to the piano, and the stage manager said, ladies and gentlemen, Angela Lansbury. And she came out on an empty stage, and I did an arpeggio, and she belted out, light the candles. Well, first of all, they had no idea who was playing, and they caught on very quickly. And she sang her heart out, and then she sang If He Walked Into My Life. And you know the rest. She got the part.
I want to talk a little bit about that song. Again, it's another one of the great standards that you've given all of us. Were you surprised when that song was taken out of context and made into a huge hit recording?
I was more than surprised, because I write songs for scenes and characters that they're in. And this song was written about an aunt singing to a nephew who she had turned into the kind of bigot that she had fought against all her life. And she was berating herself in the song and blaming herself for the way he had turned out. Now, you don't expect a popular song to come out of that material. But Edie Gourmet, God bless her, got a recording of the song and said, I know how to do that without changing anything.
So you didn't change one word?
She didn't change one word. There was a gorgeous, torchy orchestration by Don, what was his name? Don Costa, thank you. And the record came out, and half the country thought that it was a new Torch song. They had no idea until they went to the Winter Garden that it came from the show.
To hear it in context. Amazing. Well, it's certainly been sung by virtually every great female singer, and I know it's become a part of Debbie Gravitte's repertoire when she sings around the country. She certainly knows a great song when she hears it. Please welcome back Debbie Gravitte.
Where's that that boy with the bugle? My little love was always my big romance. Where's that boy with the bugle? And why did I ever buy him those damn long pants? Did he need a stronger hand? Did he need a lighter touch? Was I soft or was I tough? Did I give enough? Did I give too much? At the moment when he needed me, did I ever turn away? Would I be there when he called? If he walked into my life today, were his days a little dull? Were his nights a little wild? Did I overstate my plan? Did I stress the man and forget the child? And there must have been a million things that my heart forgot to say. Would I think of one or two if he walked into my life today? Should I blame the times I pampered him or blame the times I bossed him? What a shame I never really found the boy before I lost him. Were the years a little fast? Was his world a little free? Was there too much of a crowd? Oh, too lush and loud, and not enough of me? Though I'll ask myself my whole life long, what went wrong along the way? Would I make the same mistakes if he walked into my life today? If that boy with the bugle walked into my life today.
Jerry believes that life is to be celebrated and that the human spirit can indeed triumph. His characters, most of his characters, believe that life is worth living and that you really need to move out in front and taste the good things in life. And one of the best songs that represents that spirit that is in Jerry and is in his music is the Act One finale to Hello, Dolly. And I asked Jerry if he would play it tonight.
Before the parade passes by, I want to go and taste Saturday's high life. Before the parade passes by, I want to get some life back into my life. I'm ready to move out in front. I've had enough of just passing by life with the rest of them, with the best of them. I want to hold my head up high, for I've got a goal again, I've got to drive again. I want to feel my heart coming alive again before the parade passes by. Look at that crowd up ahead. Listen and hear that brass harmony growing. Look at that crowd up ahead. Pardon me if my old spirit is showing. All of those lights over there seem to be telling me where I'm going. When the whistles blow and the cymbals crash and the sparklers light the sky, I'm gonna raise the roof, I'm gonna carry on. Give me an old trombone, give me an old baton before the parade passes by.
For listening to my song. Thank you for the years that you've hummed along. Thank you. Promise you'll never go away. The best of times is now. What's left of summer but a faded rose? The best of times is now. As for tomorrow, well, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? So hold this moment fast and live and love as hard as you know how, and make this moment last, because the best of times is now, is now, is now. Now, not some forgotten yesterday. Now, tomorrow is too far away. So hold this moment fast and live and love as hard as you know how, and make this moment last, because the best of times is now, is now.